First is that we are going to record so that we can post this workshop to the DEM webpage so that if anyone is unable to attend live, they can still access and view the workshop and the questions and answers. Second, in the chat, I posted some helpful links to the BWRF webpage, to the RFP itself, to the application package, and to the submission portal. We'll be discussing all of those as we go through, but I figured best to have them at the beginning so that everyone can click on them and access them as we're discussing them. In terms of questions, as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat or the question and answer module. While we're going through the presentation, we won't be able to shift over to look at them, but we will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end, where we'll plan to first go through any questions that are entered in during the presentation and then open it up to live Q&A for everybody. And I think that is probably about it. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sean McCormick. I work within the Office of Water Resources. Join me.
See, I'm Katie DeMarzio with the Office of Water Resources.
And we also have Sue Kiernan.
Sue Kiernan, I'm an administrator in the Office of Water Resources.
If everyone wouldn't mind, in the chat module, if you could put in your name and which organization or entity you're representing, and maybe a very brief description of what you're interested in regarding the BWRF. And with that, I'll transition over for Katie.
Welcome. Let me know online if you can't hear me. I will speak up louder. So just the overview of what we're going to talk about today is really about the subfund, what it is, what the eligible projects are, what the eligible entities are, and then eligible costs, the requirements of your project budget and match, and then just go over how exactly to apply, the dates that we're looking at, and our evaluation criteria. And again, we'll have questions and answers at the end. So as we're going along, and if you have a question, feel free to just put it in the Q&A on Zoom. So we've got, just to go over the funding and where this comes from. The Bay and Watershed Restoration Fund is, the purpose is to protect and restore uses of our waters, whether that's drinking, fishing, swimming, shellfishing, and also healthy aquatic life, so fish and wildlife habitat. The funding was created by the green bonds, and those were most recently voter approved in 2022. So we have approximately $3 billion in funding that we anticipate to be available for these grants. They'll be awarded competitively based on the proposals that we issued. So we have a link in the chat for that, as well as it'll be, we'll put a PDF of this presentation online, and that will also be there, as well as the rules and regs governing the BWRF. And that link is also in the RFP. In terms of the categories of projects, we have three main categories for implementation projects. So this grant is primarily made for implementing projects, not necessarily just planning a project. You'll be implementing it, constructing it. And there are three subfunds. So the three categories are riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration. Number 2 is the non-point source and stormwater pollution control projects. And then the last category of projects is those that pertain to flood prevention and mitigation. There are three subfunds that we'll talk about today. So first off, I'll talk about the habitat riparian buffer restoration funds. That can be projects that would include restoration of riparian buffers. So that could be replanting of stream banks, shorelines. If there's pavement, it may include the removal of that pavement. All of that to improve water quality and habitat, reduce sedimentation and erosion. So those could include that riparian buffer, but it can also include lake restoration. Next. So it can include that riparian buffer, but can also include habitat and connectivity. So culvert replacement. And then in terms of lakes, it can specifically restore lakes that are plagued with aquatic invasive plants. They can be freshwater lakes, ponds, rivers, or reservoirs. They need to be controlling a specific aquatic invasive plant. So, and that's primarily aquatic. That would be whether it's a submerged aquatic plant or a floating aquatic plant, would be limited to those specific invasive plants. And then it must be publicly accessible for recreation, whether that's have a boat ramp or shoreline access, or it could be a lake that is a source. If there's not direct public access, it's hydrologically connected to another lake, and would be restoring that habitat and preventing that from spreading to another place. And that would include things like chemical herbicide applications to aquatic plants, but it would not include the hand pulling activities like hand pulling water testament. So those are the things that are specific for the aquatic invasive plant control projects. Projects need to be backed up by professionally recommended practices. So it's not something that you just look up online. You need to have some science and some research of what exactly is going on in the lake. You need to know exactly what plant you're targeting, and really look at a sound lake management plan, either an entire lake management plan, or it can just be a strategic plan for targeting that specific plant. And then I'll turn it over to Sean for the other funds.
All right, and our next fund is the non-point source and stormwater pollution control subfund. This subfund provides financial assistance for projects that improve or abate stormwater pollution and non-point source pollution. Can also include erosion and sedimentation. And some of our encouraged projects, but certainly not an exhaustive list, implementing actions that are recommended in TMDL water quality restoration plans that target non-point source pollution, including stormwater discharges, capital projects that enhance local stormwater management through the acquisition of vehicles or equipment that are used to maintain stormwater infrastructure. That can include vehicles like vacuum-assisted street sweepers, projects that reduce the discharge of untreated stormwater to surface waters by retaining it through upland attenuation, infiltration, or other green infrastructure means. And then these photos show some examples of bioretention basins that were installed through a previous BWRF project in Providence. And then our third subfund focuses on flood prevention and mitigation. And this is looking at addressing flooding of coastal or inland waters in a manner that incorporates or enhances natural ecosystems and hydrology. And that's a key component of it, that there has to be a component of incorporating or enhancing natural ecosystems and hydrology, and it cannot just be simply for just for flooding or a drainage issue. Some of our encouraged projects that are certainly not exhaustive list again. The removal of physical structures and revegetation of floodplains, removal of impervious surfaces and revegetation in coastal and riparian areas that are prone to flooding. Creation of increased vegetated storage capacity in floodplains. The removal or replacement of culverts that prevent flooding through improved management of peak flows and improving watercourse continuity for fish and wildlife. And the enhancement of coastal and inlet habitat resiliency in specific locations that mitigate flooding risks to infrastructure, buildings, or other structures. And now to move into the timing for this round of the BWRF. As you can see, the sub-fund for riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration, including the aquatic invasive control, has a proposal due date of February 2nd at 4 o'clock. And the other two sub-funds, the non-point source and stormwater pollution control and the flood prevention and mitigation, those have a due date of February 28th at 4 o'clock. And we'll be planning to review the applications beginning in February, especially for the riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration through April, and then we'll follow up with the applicants after that. And in terms of project eligibility, is your proposed project eligible? BWRF supports implementation projects, and we're not able to fund standalone feasibility studies or design projects. The proposed project must be clear on what is going to be constructed or implemented. Expenses that are related to final design and permitting can be funded only if they're included as a phase of the construction project. And if you have any questions on that, whether or not your project would constitute an implementation project, and or if you would be able to include design and permitting because the project will result in construction, please feel free to send questions by phone or email. We'll have our contact information at the end. The BWRF also does not fund research projects. However, costs for environmental monitoring activities to track and measure implementation project outcomes may be allowable. And as I'd mentioned before, for the flood prevention and mitigation sub-fund, projects that are designed solely to address drainage or flooding problems without any other environmental benefits are not eligible. To be eligible, they must provide an environmental co-benefit related to water quality or aquatic habitat improvement. And then this table helps to break down eligibility across the different entities and the sub-funds. And as you can see across the board, for private citizens are not eligible for any of the sub-funds. However, municipal, state, regional governments, quasi-state agencies, public schools and universities, nonprofits, environmental watershed organizations, environmental organizations, and other nonprofits that are 501c3 approved can apply for the riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration subfund and the non-point source and stormwater pollution control subfund. The only other limitation is for the flood prevention and mitigation subfund. those other non-governmental entities, for-profit business, private schools, nonprofit organizations, are not eligible for that subfund. And then in terms of demonstrating capacity, one of the components that we evaluate when we're looking at the applications is the capacity of the organization to successfully carry out the project. And so we look at a few different areas in capacity. First, does your organization have the people power to organize, maintain schedules and deadlines, keep the project running in a timely manner? If in-house you don't have that necessarily, is there another entity that you can partner with that can help provide those services? For construction project capacity, has your organization managed a construction project before? And how will you go about monitoring that to make sure that it's staying on time and that the construction is meeting the goals that you have? Administrative capacity. How would you comply with federal or state requirements such as accounting, record keeping, procurement, and reporting procedures? And finally, financial capacity. The BWRF grants they're provided on a reimbursement basis where you as the grantee would spend in order to accomplish the project. And then either upon completion of the project or in some cases upon completion of a stage of the project would then submit for reimbursement from DEM. And so with that in mind, does your organization have enough cash reserves to pay for the project and then be reimbursed afterward? Specifically for green infrastructure projects, the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank may be able to assist if you don't have the funds on hand. They have an initiative called the Stormwater Project Accelerator, and that provides upfront capital for green stormwater infrastructure projects that will eventually be funded through grant programs like BWRF. And there's no interest on the loan, but there is a 1.5% fee that's assessed when the funding is provided. However, that fee can be considered an eligible grant expense. In terms of what costs are allowable, eligible expenses can include personnel, salary, and fringe. With respect to personnel, DEM generally won't subsidize salaries of existing governmental staff, but we encourage that those expenses be allocated as match. We'll get into match in a few slides. Travel and training, supplies, equipment, construction, and contractual services that are directly related to project implementation, such as consultants, engineering, and design. And then what costs are not allowed? So we have some the projects that are focused on solely technical assistance, education, training, technology transfer, community planning, water quality monitoring. Those as standalones would not be considered an eligible project. However, those activities may be eligible as tasks that are associated with implementing a restoration action that meets the BWRF objectives that that are discussed in section 1 of the RFP. And also routine maintenance of existing structural BMPs is not eligible for grant reimbursement or to serve as match to the grant.
All right, I'll talk a little bit about the project budget. How much money can I request as an organization? So there's no single maximum grant limit. We generally expect certain projects to fall within some ranges. So for the riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration sub-fund, that would be between $7,500 and $75,000. And then the non-point source and stormwater pollution control, as well as the flood prevention and mitigation sub-fund, would be more towards $25,000 to $400,000. So so there's a wide range of that grant limit. Grant awards would be made on a reimbursable basis. So as Sean said, it's the grantee would be paying for the project and then the entirety, and then being reimbursed up to 50% of the eligible costs. So in terms of that match, that's where that 50% comes in. Grantees may request that that match be lifted to 75-25, so that you would be reimbursed 75% versus just the 50%. So that we can request that, and at our discretion we can approve that. In terms of the match requirements and what matches is really just an indicator of how much your organization is committed to a project, and it can be considered in the proposal eligibility and ranking. So in terms of what matches, towards the bottom of that slide, it can be cash, it can be value of goods or services, including in-kind contributions, so the value of equipment donated for the project, any services or goods that are directly contributed to the project, as well as any volunteer hours that are invested and are, so it would be the number of hours of volunteer service times that currently the rate paid by volunteers is $31.96 per hour. And so that can also be included as match. So again, the requested match is equal to or exceeding the 50% of project costs. And that match must relate directly to the project. So the volunteer hours are specifically on some task in the project, be reasonably valued and be supported by documentation. So that kind of goes over the match. In terms of the project timelines, we're looking for grants that are typically between 1 and 2 years, that are projects that can be completed in 1 or 2 years, with adequate support and justification. Would consider a 3-year longer project if it's a more complex project. And so projects not promptly initiated or that fall substantially behind schedule may have grant awards rescinded or reduced depending on the length that people are falling behind. In terms of what is not allowed under the grant, you cannot start project work prior to approval of a fully executed grant agreement contract. So once we have awarded monies, we still need to enter a contract between DEM and the grantee. That needs to be a fully executed signed contract before you can start work and then be reimbursed for that work. Indirect expenses are also not allowed for the BWRF purposes. Advance payments are not allowed. It's only on that reimbursed payment. And again, if you need that financial assistance for the stormwater, green infrastructure projects, that can be through RIP. Also, under things that are not allowed under the BWRF program is automatic extensions to the projects. So if things are falling behind, we cannot automatically extend the project timeline. So in terms of how to actually apply, we have the RFPs, the request for proposals, was posted on our website. You can literally go to our website, search BWRF, and the page will come up with all of these links. We also have them in the chat for you. So the RFP goes over this complete instructions of what you need to have in your grant, what's eligible, what's not eligible. And so you need to download that, read that over. And that's again at that link. And then once you've understood the complete instructions for the RFP, you can go to download the application package, which is a separate PDF document, and that has detailed sections asking specific questions. It's a PDF document and it's fillable. So you can write answers in the boxes provided in that PDF. If you need more room, those boxes will expand. There are also 2 tables that you need to fill out. One is table A is budget detail with specific task descriptions and the schedule of when those tasks will be completed. Table B is costs by category, and that includes more detailed information on what is being considered match versus what would be requested by your proposal. If you need additional rows for those tables, feel free to use that same format. If you need to fill that out in an Excel format, you can upload that as a separate document if those specific tables aren't working for you in that Adobe PDF. But they are fillable, so you should be able to use them. But if you need more rows, sometimes you get you may need to go to another format. And then lastly, those once you've filled that PDF out and saved it, you can go to the portal, which is that third link. The submission portal is essentially a survey online, and you answer a few questions, checking some boxes, filling in your contact information. If your goal is aquatic habitat restoration to control invasive plants, we have a specific part of that survey where you can check off which plant or plants that you're targeting. And then on the last page of that survey are places where you are able to upload, choose the files and upload that completed application package along with any tables or maps that you need to add on.
All right, and then in terms of what makes a good proposal, a project that's specific and it helps to address a demonstrated water quality or aquatic habitat concern, a project that's well thought out and it has clear roles described for the grantee and any partner or organizations or entities, where the grant applicant has demonstrated that they have adequate authority to carry out the project, either as the owner of the land or having access by easement or just proving that you would have the authority to complete the project. Project narrative that's concise, that's clear and easy to understand, and a budget that's realistic and match that's appropriate. Have one more time the key dates, just that the riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration is February 2nd, and the other 2 subfunds, non-point sources, stormwater pollution control, flood prevention and mitigation, are February 28th. And then here we'll jump into a little bit into the evaluation process. So first, there'll be an initial screening process by DEM staff to verify that that proposed project is eligible. And then for all the projects that are deemed eligible, we'll create a grant selection committee who will review each application based on the project evaluation criteria. Those are going to be listed on the next slide. And then the final step is that the selected projects that have been approved by the grant selection committee are submitted to the DEM director for final approval. And once that process has happened, we'd expect that announcement and development of those grant agreement contracts would follow immediately thereafter. For the project evaluation criteria, we're looking first at the severity and the magnitude of the problem, the value of the resource that's being protected, and the public benefit derived from that, the beneficial impact to the waters of the state, that's typically in pollution load reduction, and or to aquatic or riparian habitat for fish and wildlife. Next, we look at the technical merit and the likelihood of success. We look for consistency with approved plans, the applicant capacity and their history of prior projects, readiness to proceed with the project, the quality of the proposal, including accuracy of financial information, and finally, does the project address environmental justice issues? And we also wanted to provide 5 common application pitfalls that we see that may cause them to be less successful than others. First, that the proposal format's not followed. Second, that the proposal does not have measurable goals. Third, that the project's not eligible under any of the subfunds. Fourth, that there's no or poor site maps depicting where the project will take place. Fifth, that it's poorly planned if it's missing key steps such as permitting or other things that are required to see the project through. And finally, if it has project outcomes that are unrealistic. And with that, we have our contact information here. And Katie's the primary contact for any questions regarding the riparian buffer and aquatic habitat restoration subfund. And I am the primary contact for the non-point source and stormwater pollution control subfund and the flood prevention and mitigation subfund. And then with that, it'll take just 1 second. I'm going to open up the chat and the question and answer and review any of the questions that are here. All right, so we had a question from Jack regarding the PowerPoint, but it looks like that was it popped back up. So I guess with that, we'll open it up to everybody. If you have a question, please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask directly, or if you'd prefer to enter it into the chat module or the question and answer module, we'd be happy to answer it.
I do have a question.
Okay.
We're told that our project is going to be 3 years, and we may have funding for the first year. That wouldn't be through DEM, it would be through West Fish and Wildlife. And I'm assuming that we could start that part before an executed grant agreement with DEM.
The restriction on not starting before a grant agreement would apply to any activities that you're going to be seeking reimbursement for from that grant. So yes, you can have planning and people can be carrying out activities that relate to a larger project that may have occurred. But if you're going to be seeking reimbursement of grant funds, then the agreement has to be in place before that work takes place.
So we're waiting for the amount to find out if it covers. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Then we have a question from Richard. Would an attached cover letter be appropriate? I would say certainly. If you want to attach a cover letter, on the last page of the submission portal, there's a there's a spot where you can upload additional supporting documents. And if you'd like to attach a cover letter, please feel free to upload it there. And a second question, could a aquatic invasive species control project include several years of treatment?
Right, so the projects we're generally looking for reimbursement for 1 to 2 years, possibly 3 years. So that can include several years of treatment. And it would be 3 years from the contract. So that could cover more than.
So I think the department is very interested, and our larger state government is interested in seeing the funds used expeditiously. So people are free to propose a multi-year program, and that may be, and we want to know the context of those so that we know what's been recommended as being effective for addressing the problem that would be happening with aquatic plants in the lake. But the department will reserve the right to distribute the funding in a manner that is best for the program. And so it may be that people would receive a partial award if there's a high demand, and we need to see the funds go into use quickly. So feel free to apply for a multi-year program, but the department may reserve the right to fund a portion of that through this particular RFP.
Okay, and then we have one additional question. What time period can match be counted as eligible? I have been involved in projects where previous supporting work was counted sometimes from 6 to 12 months prior.
The match really needs to relate to the project that's going to be supported by the grant. And so anything that would predate the grant agreement, you need to talk to us about it. We have sometimes allowed a planning commitment of funding for planning that's in pretty close proximity to when the implementation is going forward as match. It's unlikely that we would count something that occurred years before as match.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that makes sense. We've had, or at least, like I said, projects that I've been involved with have had like multiple phases and maybe like a treatment chain for green infrastructure, and then part of it was designed. All of it was designed, and then part of it was implemented, and then like another round of funding funded the implementation, but then the match was used for some of the design or maybe like maintenance of the original portion. And so that's just kind of why I asked that. Okay. So essentially it's at your guys' discretion. Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just say we are usually able to work with people and identify a way to satisfy match requirements in most cases. So feel free to, if you're finding that a challenge on how to represent match, please get in touch with us and we'll
Fair enough. I appreciate that. Thank
try to
you.
explore what might be possible.
And there's another question. We are not the sole shoreline owner of the body of water for which we would be applying. Other owners include the whole gamut of applicant categories, permitted and not. Is our 501c3 status enough to allow us to apply?
So if a nonprofit, an NGO, nonprofit organization wants to undertake a project and it's affecting a body of water that other people may have ownership interests in, it's incumbent on the 501c3 organization to get the proper permissions to be able to proceed with the project. It doesn't, you can still apply, but you're going to have to address how you would get permission to proceed if you don't have clear access. or
Yeah, no,
ownership of the
sorry,
land.
that was my question, and I was just,
And
is
in let me just add that in terms of herbicide permitting, it's required that that's part of the permitting process for herbicide treatments in lakes. It's inherently part of the process that people have permission to proceed. So that does get looked at in planning treatments.
absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that the fact that as private owners are not in the eligibility category, if about 50% of the shoreline ownership is private residents, that I would still be eligible, that we would still be eligible, despite the fact that we are not. And there's a wide mixture of private individuals, other nonprofits. I think some of it's owned by the state as well. And I just wanted to make sure that the non-eligibility of owners, since even though they wouldn't be able to apply, that there would be any obstruction on our ability to apply as non-applicants would be benefiting from the project.
Assuming are we talking about doing some kind of work in a lake?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then yes, you're free to organize a project and be the point person applicant, and then work out all the arrangements that are necessary in terms of being able to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing else in the chat?
Nothing right now. I guess we'll give another moment. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to unmute or to post it into the chat. We'll probably give a minute or two, and if we don't have anything else, then the workshop will be complete. All right, not seeing anything else. I'll also mention if you think of something after the fact, please reach out to us. Katie and I serving as the primary contacts for our respective sub-funds. But we love to discuss and hear what your plans are, and we can provide some feedback, whether it's on eligibility or how you're planning to implement the project. Thank you, Richard. And thank you everyone for attending. We hope that you found it helpful and informative. There will be another presentation, this workshop again on the 16th. I think largely it'll be identical. The only difference likely will be the question and answer. But feel free to attend that if you'd like as well. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing your applications. Thank you.
Thanks.